Welcome, family. At Kingdom Academy, we equip parents in spiritual warfare training so you can raise up your children as spirit warriors, well prepared to stand against the principalities and powers of darkness. So today's guest is Kelli Trontel. I am so excited to have her here today because we actually met, I don't even know math. How many years ago was that? 2019.
Yeah, 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Wow, it feels like a million years.
It
and
does.
At the same time, like yesterday.
Yeah.
It's so weird. But we met at a She Speaks conference where Lisa Turkhurst was speaking. And it was just, it was really interesting because I think I had followed you on Facebook for a while before that. And I don't even know how I found, like, how we connected on there.
Right.
But I've watched her go through I've watched her go through a journey where she's gone through some serious fires.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that I'm so excited to hear you share is how you've come through it and how you were just talking on this. So I just wanted you to pick up there, but on the faithfulness of God.
Yeah. The last 5 years, I believe, has been just a learning experience, but getting firsthand experience and of the Lord's faithfulness. It's something I've heard about my entire life, and we know that God is good. You know, the scriptures tell us that, and we believe it, and we know it to be true. But it's another level when you are so desperate and dependent on His faithfulness to get you through. And, the Lord loves women. And that is specifically something that I've really been diving into lately is the truthfulness of that fact that I didn't really hear a lot about growing up, specifically, just the Lord's heart for women and how much He cared for women and made provisions for women. He welcomed women even into His ministry, and women funded and backed His ministry. And He just cares deeply for women. So in that season where I felt discarded and abandoned, I remember one of those first early nights, looking out the window, and the first thoughts were coming through my mind was, am I enough, for someone to stay and fight for? Is our marriage enough? And I started to think, like, we're not enough. Like, we're not enough. And immediately I have this marked moment of hearing the Lord say to me, am I enough for you? And that really started the journey of just my dependency and desperation for the Lord like never before.
Yeah, the two words you said, desperate and dependent, I think are so powerful, because even as I've been learning that walk as well of learning God's faithfulness, I think we can't even experience it until we come to that place of desperate and needing to be dependent on Him.
Right.
Because that desperation means we're at the end of ourselves. And I truly believe we have to be at the end of ourselves to be willing to step into the fullness of what He has for us. And the fullness of what He has for us is restoration.
That's right.
He wants to bring us into everything He created us to be. But first, we have to be willing, not even willing. We have to be there.
That's
we have to get to that place.
That's right.
Probably kicking and screaming, actually.
Whatever it takes. Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. It's you don't know until you know. And, there's things that I look back on now. I didn't know how to care for a single mom or the questions to ask until I became one. And so that kind of goes along with what you were saying. You don't know what that dependency and desperation is like until you're there. Yeah. And as hard as it is a beautiful thing. There's nothing about a lot of what I've walked through that I would wish away. The fire was fierce, but He's faithful and turning things around and in His time. And, it's been a season of long suffering, it was 5 full years before I saw major breakthrough. And but through those 5 years, I am not who I was when you and I met. Like, I'm just not even that person. And I have words for things, I have experiences, and it's a different relationship with the Lord. That's mine. It's not my family's. It's not, a childhood, faith that I'm clinging to, but it's Kelli's faith.
Yes. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about walking through the fire is that it does make it personal.
Yeah.
It makes our relationship with the Lord personal. Yeah, we grow up and we are told about the Lord, where we accept the Lord because we've been told, because we've grown up that way, or because or because people have ministered in our lives that way. But then we go through the fire, and that desperation and that dependence comes, and it becomes personal.
Yeah.
And that's when we really get to know him at a level that it's worth it all. And I always find it so fascinatingly awesome that Jesus said to every single one of his disciples, leave everything and follow me.
Mm.
There's a cost
to
have that intimacy with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how did it look like from the battle and in the midst of the fire? And I know we're like so thankful when we come through the fire, but in the middle of it, in those low times, how did God show up for you in ways of showing that faithfulness to you?
Yeah. Well, worship, I say a lot, worship is our weapon, and it truly is. And, it sounds so basic, and I would feel silly saying it, but I don't anymore because it's not basic. It was truly life-giving for me. Because there's times that we struggle to find our voice, or times that I didn't feel like singing. I couldn't even get a worship lyric out without bawling my eyes out. Like, I just was like, I can't do this. So I think just having worship on in your home ministers to our spirit and our hearts, even when we can't do it on our own. So I am so grateful for just biblical worship songs that truly helped me get through those seasons. And so those artists were singing on my behalf and just ministering to my heart. And then we slowly get our voice back, and I'm singing in the shower again. And my kids and I are singing together. And so just filling our homes with worship. And I still do it to this day. I mean, it's not I'm having a bad day, I'm putting worship on. Like, worship is the culture of my home. It's on all the time. And I just love to fill our space with praise and goodness. And so that's one way that I feel like the Lord met me, just even in worship, and just relationships and people. I remember meeting you at She Speaks. You were so kind to me. I remember you took a picture of me in front of like the stage. I think there was like some words on the back of the screen. I was like, I need to find that. And I took a photo of you, and I just remember, just the sweet relationships that the Lord brought to me. Cause there was a lot of fallout, divorce is a ugly, ugly thing. And I didn't just lose a marriage and a relationship, but friendships and, a lot. And so, I just felt like the Lord was fighting for me before I ever knew I needed to be fought for, and, positioning me in relationships and pulling me out of relationships, and, just providing safe, and godly relationships for me, as I was committed, to, I just want what you have for me in the season, Lord. Like, my world is turned upside down. I just want what you have for me. And so I was choosy and picky about who I spent time with, and, what tables I was sitting at, how I spent my time. But the Lord was faithful. He did a major shaking up of my life. I'm sitting at a table today that looks nothing like the table I had 5 years ago. People that I thought would be in my life forever. and that's okay too. I don't believe that endings are all bad. They're good. And if you're growing, I don't, it's not really a risk, but you run the risk of like outgrowing some relationships and friendships. And I feel like that would be really important to normalize that. I think in the time we're little, we we're, um, we believe like best friends forever, and there's no, change of seasons. And I believe if you're growing and the people that are growing with you, that's great. But if they're not, you may be outgrowing some things.
Yes.
So surrendering to that.
That's so interesting hearing you say that too, because I definitely have experienced that as well. But and it's seasonal sometimes. And I think somebody said that to me a couple years ago. They're like, well, we're definitely friends, but who knows? It may be seasonal. And when they said that, I was like, hey, what? What are you talking about? Like, so you're already choosing not to be a friend forever with me. But then it was like a year and a half later and they were no longer in my life. But I realized, oh yeah, I get it. Sometimes relationships are seasonal. And like you just said, we have this idea from when we're younger that, best friends forever, but it's not always like that. And I always wondered what the scripture said when it said there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. And I've really realized it is the Lord. And I didn't want to realize that before when I used to read it, because I was like, no, God, obviously God's our friend. He's got to mean there's someone else out there who's our friend that sticks closer than a brother, but there isn't. And there can't be. And if we have that expectation from somebody, then we're putting that expectation that is impossible on them.
Right.
And we just don't, and we're kind of stepping out of God's will to do that.
Yeah.
Because we're putting a weight and a burden and an expectation on something that isn't the Lord.
Right.
And all our expectation should be in Him.
Yeah. Right.
And then as you were saying earlier too, I wanted to mention when you were talking about worship and how you just were shifting that atmosphere in your home constantly. Worship is an atmosphere shifter.
Yeah.
And I remember there was days for me too when I was just curled up on the bathroom floor. And it became like, for some reason, my favorite spot to curl up, the uncomfortable bathroom floor of my home at the time. And I remember one day I was sitting there just, ugly crying. And the Lord came to me and said, Heather, worship me. And I was like, what? I was like, Lord, like, just let me cry right now. Why can't I just cry? And the Lord said, I want a sacrifice of worship. And I was like, why, Lord? And He said, I'll tell you afterwards. Worship me.
Wow.
And so I just began like trying, like through my crying and through my everything, like, and I kept pressing because I was going to be obedient. I was going to do it. But it was so difficult because I was just in the heat of bawling my eyes out. But in that moment, as I just was trying to get into like worshiping the Lord, I suddenly felt the atmosphere shift.
Yeah.
And I just started laughing because it was so sudden when it happened, and it was so swift, and it shifted all my thoughts and my mind and everything. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? But that is so important, I think, for everybody to be encouraged and to understand that when we're going through the fire, when we're going through hard times, sometimes it can seem impossible to worship. But I mean, look at Paul and Silas. They had just been beaten to the inch of their lives. They were thrown in shackles in a prison scape we can't even fathom. And they had been falsely accused. So many things to just fall into a hot mess over. And they worshiped. And it shifted the atmosphere so greatly. It broke chains.
That's right.
And I think that's what we need to know.
Absolutely.
Is like when we are worshiping, it not only shifts the atmosphere, but it's going to break chains off of us.
That's right.
And even off of anybody who's in that atmosphere. So your children, you were breaking chains off of them too, which is just
absolutely.
And
that's
then,
so good.
Yeah. And then afterwards I was like, okay, Lord, so what was up with that? Why did you ask me to do the sacrifice of praise? He said, it's not for me, Heather. I don't need you to worship me. I want you to worship me because I know what worship will do for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, because it brings us into his presence. It brings us into that intimacy. And then it shifts atmospheres and breaks chains.
That's so good, girl. And, as you were saying that, I heard someone recently talk about, worshiping, through the fire and that obedience and doing worship in the middle, right? Not waiting until things are better and we feel like it, but that type of sacrifice, right? That we're bringing to him and worshiping in the middle of the fire is a worship that we won't experience in eternity. Like we won't be worshiping from that sadness or from the grief. Like that type of worship is unique and special and unlike the worship that we'll have for eternity. And so even from that perspective of like, gosh, like to be able to worship from this place is definitely unique and holy and special. And we don't always get that opportunity, and it certainly won't be from that perspective in eternity. So to be able to have that type of worship experience and offer that to him is something that I believe is so sacred, towards him, but just how gracious he is, as you said. I mean, what it does for us. So it's super powerful. And like I said at the beginning, I feel like it feels so like basic, like worship, put your worship music on. But that is like my number one thing when people write me, how did you get through this? And I just said, what are you listening to? Like I created a Spotify playlist called Warrior Worship. And I was really intentional with what I put on there, not all worship songs are created equal. And so looking at the lyrics and, I believe it's so important who we're listening to, what we're listening to, and just holding tight to worship.
Yeah. Guarding our gates.
Yeah.
Especially when we're in the fire, especially when we're under attack. We have to realize, and those gates are, yes, who's speaking to us, what we're allowing ourselves to listen to, whether it's music or television or social media or people or the word.
Yeah.
But we have to be aware. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And I think it's so important right now, especially in the days that we're in, that we realize like we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this day and age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. That means we have to put on the armor intentionally.
That's right.
We have to understand every day that we go out that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood. So even when people or situations come against us, we have to realize this is war.
Yeah.
We're right now in this world, we are in war.
That's right.
Constantly. It's just many of us are going around dragging our swords behind us like a little kid with their blankie on the playground. And we need to have that sword up. We need to be on guard. We need to be sober and vigilant because our enemy is prowling around seeking whom he may devour.
That's right.
And we need to understand that. And our gates, what goes out of our gates matter, like our mouths speaking what we speak.
Right.
And I know like in the heat of the fire and the heat of the battle, when you're under attack and the enemy is coming at you and pressing in on all sides, there's a lot of stuff that can come out of our mouths.
Yeah.
And I know it can be a reflection of our hearts. I definitely saw depths of my heart that I did not want to see during that time. And I remember there was one time a really bad situation happened at my house and the whole house was flooding and I didn't know what to do. And I had nobody to call and I didn't have any means myself to resolve the situation. And I just sat down and started crying. But that was after I had a huge release of words I should not have said.
Yeah.
And then I sat down and I was so upset and I was like, Lord, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I still want to say it right now. I'm so angry. Why is this coming out of me? And what is this? I thought I was past this stuff, but here it is. And the Lord said, Heather, when you go through the fire, it exposes the depths of the deepest parts of your heart. Don't grovel in shame over it. Just give it to me.
Yeah.
Just in the moment that it's being drawn up, in the minute it's being exposed, surrender it to me.
That's right.
And say, Lord, here's all this. I give it to you. I don't want this. I don't want this in me. I don't want these responses. I don't want these reactions. And that's the beautiful thing about the fires. It will bring up those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you were talking about just, armoring up and, it's so easy to live on cruise control. And I realized, at that time in 2017, I was like, I've got this beautiful family and we own this cute little frozen yogurt and coffee shop. I'm worship leader at my church. Like just everything was good. And, I am just like, in a matter of a moment, that, your life can just be just rocked. And so that's just the takeaway of I don't want to live on that cruise control. Like we're targets every single day. And, I don't want to live like that anymore, thinking that everything's good. We're good. We got it all together and there's security and financial and this and that. It's like, it can all be taken away and flattened out in a moment. And so, just being, as you said, like on guard and guarding your gates and your relationships, taking inventory, do you have relationships in your life right now, that could handle walking through the fire with you, taking inventory of those friendships. I thought I did, but I've learned a lot since then. And so to me, it's important to have people in my life right now who are going to be people that are going to help lift my arms up in a season, of grief or loss or whatnot. So it really allowed me to just take a step back and just kind of do a clean look at like, what have I set myself up around, relationship wise and, community and, just guarding our hearts, guarding our homes and relationships. And it's all very, very important. And we hear that growing up again, you've probably heard it from your parents, choose your friend wisely. We know that that's, the Lord says the same as well, it's friendships matter. And, but it's so true.
I think one of the lessons that I've been definitely learning over the past few years is friendships matter. And as we get older and we step into things like business and partnerships, that partnerships matter too. And I think one of the most amazing stories in scripture that comes to mind as you're saying that to me is when one of my favorite kings in the Bible is King Jehoshaphat. And I mean, he was just such an incredible warrior king. He knew strategy. He knew it so well that kings from other lands would come to him to say, hey, will you go to war with me? Will you partner with me? Because they knew if they partnered with Jehoshaphat, they would win. And so even evil Ahab came to him and asked for that partnership. And Jehoshaphat did, even though he was warned a couple times not to go into partnership with him. And interestingly enough, in his last days, he partnered again. I think it was with one of the offspring of Ahab to make ships that would go and get the gold of Ophir. And it literally says, and the Lord actually at the time had led me to that part. And it was literally the last verse that the Lord had told me to go read. And when I read it, I'm like, Lord, I don't get it. This is the end of Jehoshaphat's life. What is this supposed to say to me? And he said, read that again. And I read it, and it basically said that the Lord broke Jehoshaphat's ships before he died, right before he passed. He broke the ships before they could even leave the harbor. And I was like, well, that's a bummer. He was going to go get the stronghold of Ophir. But then I realized he was partnered with an evil enemy. And if he would have went out in that evil partnership, he would have went out in that sin. God literally protected him from the sin by breaking that yoke, by breaking that partnership with that evil person right before he went out. So then when he passed, the word can literally say, and he went out as a righteous man for the Lord.
So
but
good.
if those ships wouldn't have been broken, he wouldn't have gone out that way.
That's right. Yeah.
And then all through scripture, we have so many verses telling us not to be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard because I've seen in so many women's relationships, especially over the past few years, especially since I've gone through it. I have too. And then we talk to other women and we hear these same stories coming out of these men who are breaking their vows and leaving and whatever reasons they're leaving. And interesting because a lot of them call themselves Christians. And yet there's an unequal yoking there. And I say this because I say this for any women out there, but also the younger women who haven't been married yet. Don't let time rush you into that. Don't let yourself be deceived. Just because somebody calls themselves a Christian does not mean that they are. You have to look for those fruits.
That's right.
And if you're not walking where you're supposed to be walking with the Lord, then wait. Until you get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love that analogy that you gave about, just the being equally yoked. And that is in friendship, it's in marriage, but even in business and partnership, and, I recently had, gotten laid off from a job last year, and it was like blindsiding to me and, just a friendship and a partnership that I thought was something more, than it was obviously when you look at just actions at the end of something and looking back on things. And, but even in that, just to see God's faithfulness, that pulling me up and out of something to be able to place me where he has me now. And, so that's something I'm working on. I think we're so quick to look at any loss or any change of direction as a negative, as something that's negative, and I want to be quick to just trust, okay, Lord, you're rearranging something here that I'm not seeing, but I trust you. That again, not every ending is a negative or bad thing, but necessary for him to do something new. And, the partnerships is very, very important to align yourself with just godly people and not just people that say that they are, but you said, just examine the fruit and look at their lives.
And going through the fire will definitely strengthen your discernment. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You get wisdom in that fire. I love the story now when I look back after coming through what I'm coming through. And I think I'm still in the fire in some sense, but I almost don't want to leave the fire because I like being in this place. Like I want everything purified and I want everything removed. And at this point, it's like, I didn't come through this fire this far to just jump out.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that they were thrown into that hot fire. The second they stood up in it and realized, we're not burning. Human instinct would be run out before we do. I don't know what's going on, but get out of here. But they didn't. They just stood there in the fire. And then the Lord appeared there with them because they chose to remain in the fire. They chose to remain in that sanctification. They chose to remain in that place where the Lord, a willingness to let the Lord remove everything.
Yes.
That's what that fire is. It's where we just, when everything is spinning around us, we choose to say, okay, have your way in this, Lord.
That's right.
I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't like it. I don't like all this stuff, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to surrender to you.
That's right.
I'm going to surrender to what this is, to what this looks like.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And then that's when stuff starts coming off of us. That's when yokes get broken. That's when the dross is just melted away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I've felt those same feelings and thoughts of, when you're in the fire, there's a closeness, and we know he draws near to the brokenhearted, and he does. And there was many days this summer, I would go to bed the night before and I could see my back patio from my bedroom window, and I couldn't wait to be seated out there again with my coffee and my Bible and just be with the Lord. I just, like, the night before, I couldn't wait to get back there.
Oh, I love that.
And I was thinking that I don't have this addiction to, like, the chaos and the drama. Like, I don't want that. I'm like, Lord, yeah. But there was, like, kind of a sadness almost of, like, eventually, life is going to get better. I know it, and, but I don't want to lose this dependency. I don't want to lose this fire, of just, craving to be with you and meeting with you. And, honestly, it's just reality. When life is going good, we kind of forget, like, our dependency on the Lord, and we're doing things in our own strength. And, but that was just, I felt that when you said, I don't want to rush out of here. Yes, I want peace and blessing and favor and goodness. I want all of those things, but not in exchange for, my time and dependency on the Lord, and just, to carry both.
I had a lot of people tell me when I would tell them about the pleasure I was getting in the fire, like how you were looking out at that back deck, being like, oh, I just can't wait to be, like, in his presence, just pouring into his word. And I would tell people I had that, and they'd be like, oh, I remember those days. And that would, like, kind of freak me out and make me a little bit depressed. I was like, what do you mean you remember those days? This is never going to go away. Like, I don't want this to go away. And they're like, oh, it's a season in your life. It'll go away. And I went to the Lord and I was like, Lord, I don't want to ask for bad things to happen in my life, but I'm willing to take whatever it is at the cost to never lose this with you.
That's right.
I want to remain. And if it means remaining in the fire to keep this with you, to keep this intimacy, to keep this, like, desperation for him, like, it's just, I want more. I want more. I want more. I can't get enough of you, Lord. Like, I've never felt like this about even a human in my life. Like, it's just such a deep, overflowing desire. And I was like, if that's the cost to remain in the fire, then I don't want to leave the fire. And I know I'm going to regret that some days that I've said that, but then there'll be other days that I won't, because I just need more of him.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And we can. It's not just a season. And that's what I'm fully committed to, just through divorce. On paper, it looks like, okay, I have my kids half time, they have a half of a mom, but I've said they have a more, like, focused and fierce mom now. They have more of me than they did when, we were a family unit and living together and had every day together. My time, how I view time, is radically different than it was before. And so I look at other families that haven't experienced what I've experienced, and they get their kids every night of the week and every holiday. And, I know that I spend my time different and I view time differently. But it's a way we should all be viewing our time. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are guaranteed the next holiday. And so I think for me, it's just, it is what my life is. Cause I know if I have Christmas this year, I won't have next year. Like, that's just my reality. But there's just, it's a gift, right? To be able to look at life, even though I wanted to have picked it to be this way, but it's been a gift to be able to look at life through this lens. But truly it's a way we should all be living our lives. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. And so, because of our schedule and, because of just life now, that is how I view my life. And so, I care what our weeks look like. I'm not signing my kids up where there's 4 practices a week, right? Because I want to have dinner at our table together because I only get 3. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it's just a different lens, but at time.
Time has been something really amazing that the Lord has been teaching me and showing me for the past few years too. And I've realized that when we step into the Lord's will and the Lord's time, He slows our time down
Yeah.
a lot. Like
Mhm.
even how you're saying, like now you don't want to put them in like a bunch of sports, which most parents think that's a good thing and they want to do that. And and I can have them in all these things and all week we're so busy because we're doing
Yeah.
all these things, but you're not spending quality time together.
Mhm.
And I know that can come across harsh for a lot of people, but in this time we're in, I don't have time to be around the bush to anybody
Yeah.
because we're going to be held accountable
Mhm.
for what the Lord has given to us. And parents have been given children. Those are your talents.
Yeah.
And are you going to bury that talent in the backyard or are you going to invest your
Right.
time in that talent? And the word says that you're to walk with them throughout the day and teach them. So as much as you have access to do that, you should be walking with them and teaching them, being
Mhm.
side by side with them. And now the way you look at your time now, because it's out of your hands right now in this situation to do it any other way, is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at it as, okay, I've got time to fuel up.
Mhm.
I've got time to like bring them back and raise them up like warriors. But then I've got that time to go back into the Father. And it reminds me of how Jesus would do that when he was here on earth. He would go out and he would do what the Father told him to do, but then he'd go back and he'd rest in the presence of the Father. And the Father would give him new direction. And then he'd go back out and he would obey it. And it was just that process going in and out, in and out. And that's how you're living now. Like
Just that
you have
rhythm,
that.
Yeah.
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 It's a new way
Absolutely.
and a new rhythm, but your acceptance of it is going to be healing for your children.
Right.
I think that's a huge thing parents don't realize is I've heard parents who have said, "Oh, I hate that my kid has to go back and forth and do all this traveling to get to the other spouse and I hate that their life is being uprooted and all of this." And I was like, honestly, if you make it okay for your kids, it will be okay for your kids.
Right.
But if
Right.
you're complaining about it out loud to them all the time and stressing over it, and they see that stress, which believe me, they see all the stress even when you're
Right.
hiding it, then it will be stressful to them. But children are resilient. And I don't mean that in a way of like hit them with everything intentionally, but I mean, not even just resilient, they follow your example.
Right.
They're little mirrors. And I mean, if you see a problem in them, then check yourself.
Yeah.
Because they're mirroring something.
That's right. And just the opportunity, again, to not just tell them about God's faithfulness and goodness, but they're getting to see it and how we
Yes.
respond to it and how we flex, with the challenges that come our way. And so
Yeah.
it's no longer just turn the other cheek or do this or do that. Like they're watching us and they're seeing us. And
Yes.
so again, just I feel like it is such a perspective shift. We can either look at just these negatives and what was taken away, or okay, radical acceptance. This is where we're at. This is what we're doing. And how do we make the best of it? How do we partner with the Lord and be who our kids need? And, a healthy half time, mom is a lot healthier than an unhealthy full time, and so I'm not coming in, lacking anything and my kids aren't lacking anything. And so just giving them that opportunity to see your faith lived out and your dependency on him and worship in the home. And, life today looks drastically different than 5 years ago. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Like I'm so grateful for our home and the way that I've been able to cultivate, worship into our home and live this out for them to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, as you've come through all of this, what would you say are some of your favorite, biggest takeaways? Like, what are the golden nuggets kind of that the Lord
Yeah.
has really given you through this time?
Yeah. The first one, I said worship is our weapon. And
Yes.
I'm 100% like that's number one for sure. Um, there's just things that happen that we don't even see. As you made mention, we're not warring with flesh and blood. Like there is so much going on around us. And so just anointing my home and having worship on in our home, was very, just a top priority and still is. And, the Lord sees everything, and just trusting, again, I'm reminded, he was fighting for me before I knew that I needed to be fought for. The blindsiding events that happened, I had no idea what was going on leading up to that. And it blows me away when I think about how things were revealed to me, and the Lord in those details, coming through in his time, to just open my eyes to what was going on that I had no idea about, and the scheming and the planning. And, God stepped in, and, these people did not get to follow through with the plan that they had, and God revealed it in his time. And so just holding on to the fact that, God sees it all, and he does fight for us. Like Exodus 14:14 was like my life verse, the Lord will fight for you. There's a couple different versions, that say, you only need to stand still. There's another one that says, to remain silent and quiet. The Lord sees, and he's our defender. And this has been a season for me, of allowing him to defend me and fight for me, and just holding tight to that. The Lord fights for us, and I hope that can just bring peace to whoever's listening to this right now, because our flesh wants to fight and defend, ourselves, but the Lord sees it all.
What have you done now since you no longer have the business that you had before? Do you have anything that you want to share that you do now?
Yeah. So we had opened up a frozen yogurt and coffee shop. So I was running a shop here in downtown Whitefish for about 7 years. Closed that during the divorce, and I helped a woman open up another coffee shop in town. And more recently, I've been working as a social media manager, which I just love. Like I love storytelling. I love championing other people, and just getting to just dabble in things that I do love. This isn't about me. It's not elevating my platform or like my career. I've really loved being able to come around some really neat nonprofits and authors and help craft their story in their language and share their stories. So it's a blessing, to live in Montana. I always say in the middle of nowhere, Montana, and to be able to make a living, and have freedom in my schedule to be a mom, be able to pick up my kids from school. I love the way that the Lord has provided just work opportunities for me, to still be able to be a mom to my kids and have the freedom to do, like I said, like the school pickups and drop offs and school parties and things like that. So, so working, for a couple nonprofits. And as you know, just with this, the season came with a lot of outrageous attorney bills. And this past January, I was looking at, a $46,000 attorney bill. And, that was just another thing of just totally trusting the Lord. Like, I don't know how this is going to get taken care of, but in the middle of this 2-day court trial that I had, I heard the Lord audibly tell me, as I was being really heavily pressured to settle, that the finances will be taken care of. Like I heard that. So I'm now looking at my attorney. I didn't even tell him I got laid off from my job, because I thought like he's gonna fire me. And so he had no idea. So here I am, no job. I owe him more than I have in my savings account. And I just looked at him and he knows my faith. And so I just said, I literally just heard the Lord tell me that the finances will be taken care of. I am not settling. And so just this month, I'll be writing my last and final check to the attorney. So in 9 months, the Lord he's done what he said he would do. And it's just incredible because money has been a topic for me. I've been around it and I've seen it destroy relationships. And rather than me having a love of money, I was on the other side of it. Like, I don't care about it, and that's not smart either. Money is an awesome tool in the hands of, trustworthy and amazing, God loving and God fearing people. It's an amazing tool. And so he's really rewritten my perspective and mindset on money specifically this year. And has been so faithful. And so I love that I've been able to partner with him. The Lord gave me the idea of She Smiles at the Future. And I went online and just like every URL is taken. So I just checked it and it was available.
Wow.
So I bought it right away. And just to see this message of She Smiles at the Future. And that was a fundraising campaign that I did. And it was just incredible. I didn't know what that would look like, but I just believe that the seeds that the Lord plants in our hearts, just to be obedient with that. We don't have to have all the answers. And sometimes I get caught up in details and I can get stuck. And that was just a total, okay, Lord, I'm going to design something around this. And I found a printer in Nashville and just, he's done it. Like, he has done the thing. And it's just so cool that this is not just my story or my provision story, but a message that so many women have written to me, and have just been encouraged and reminded, of that hope that we have. Life is hard. We know that trials and tribulation, that's promised to us, but what's also promised to us is our hope, and we can smile at the future, and God's good and faithful. So,
amen. What is the domain and where can people go, and what is there for them to find?
All still attached to kellitrontel.com. So I'm still dreaming about, Lord, what do you want to do as She Smiles at the Future? So, but yeah, kellitrontel.com is my website, and I have a shop on there. I'm getting ready to launch a sweatshirt, and and then I'm just excited to just dream, to see what God wants to do with this merch company. Who else can this had 100% of the proceeds was going towards these attorney's fees. And now that is done, okay, Lord, I love this idea still. I love this merch. Like, I love merch. I love t-shirts and sweatshirts and designs and messages. What does this look like? What is this next round? What does that go to? So, just kind of dreaming about how I can just partner and support other women with this message.
Awesome. Well, that's beautiful. And I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kelli. This has been amazing.
So good to talk with you. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks so much for joining this conversation with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. For episodes, offers, or guest information, please visit us at rainandjoy.com/Spiritwear Academy, or join us on Instagram at rainandjoy and click the link in the bio for access.